So the Kooks 1 3/4 inch long tube headers here should appeal to the 2011 through 14 GT owners out there who are looking to grab one of the nicest long tubes in the category from a construction and build standpoint, and would prefer that slightly smaller 1 3/4 inch primary to the larger 1 7/8 inch header. Now the Kooks headers here will not include a shorty mid-pipe right out of the box, so interested buyers will need to also pick up a corresponding Kooks X or H pipe on the site to complete the overall package. Now by themselves, the headers will run you right around $1,000, and the install will get a knuckle busting 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, and we will have a detailed walkthrough to come later in the video. Now for the guys out there who might not be aware, Kooks makes an absolutely killer header and a killer product overall. In fact, I've had the pleasure of touring the Kooks facilities, and I can say the gang down there in North Carolina take a lot of pride in their work because it really does show in the final product, as is the case here with this Coyote header. But why go with an aftermarket long tube header in the first place? Well, simple, right? To get more power and more sound out of your naturally aspirated or blown Coyote engine. Now we are going to show you guys some dyno numbers here. Now the car we're using does have some existing modifications like a Boss manifold and a custom tune. So we established a baseline run first, then got to work installing the Kooks long tube headers in addition to a catted X pipe, reran the car, and here are those results. Baseline run using our manual S197 GT gave us 398 horsepower and 347 pound-feet of torque at the rear wheels. With the Kooks long tubes in place, the car is now making 406 horsepower and 349 pound-feet of torque to the rear wheels. That's good for a peak gain of 8 horsepower over those baseline numbers, and gains of as much as 18 horsepower and 16 pound-feet of torque under the curve. But power aside, another big draw with adding a long tube like this is just the total transformation of your exhaust tone and also your volume. Just a downright angry tone with a lot more bark is the best way I can sum it up. Now ultimately, again, you're going to have a few different things to help shape your sound, whether it be your mid-pipe, X or H, catless versus catted, in addition to the exhaust itself. But either way, just know that things are going to be noticeably louder with a long tube in place. But let's get back to the Kooks headers we're talking about here in this video. And again, guys, just superb quality from the gang over at Kooks. This does include the premium 304 grade stainless steel throughout, your mandrel vent 1 3/4 inch primaries, 3/8 inch laser cut flange at the head, all ending in your 3-inch collectors down here, of course, loaded with Kooks merge spike technology. And that's just basically designed to help increase exhaust velocity, scavenging, things like that, making for better flow overall. And on top of that, guys, just beautiful construction, quality welds. All the welds at the head have been smoothed out to help reduce that turbulence and just make for a better product overall. Well, let's touch on that 1 3/4 inch primary size a little bit more. Again, one of your most common diameters here in the Coyote aftermarket, along with that slightly larger 1 7/8 inch offering. And look, guys, they're both gonna make power over the factory manifolds you are replacing, but Conventional wisdom might tell you a smaller diameter primary will make slightly better torque at lower RPM levels, but be more of a restriction at the upper RPM level when you're making bigger power and vice versa. So what I will say the difference is going to be extremely minimal on most setups here. However, if you guys are leaning towards forced induction in the long road, I might steer you more towards that slightly larger primary, like the 1 7/8 inch option for instance, but again, both will certainly make more power over those factory manifolds. Now, speaking of making more power, ideally I'd recommend pairing a long tube with a custom tune, not only to maximize your gains, but if you do decide to go with an off-road or catless mid-pipe, it will address the secondary O2s on your ride. I do want to remind you guys that the Kooks long tube headers again do not include a mid-pipe, meaning you're going to need to purchase one separately in order to connect the long tubes to either your stock or aftermarket exhaust system. Now, I do want to point out that Kooks offers a number of different mid-pipe solutions here on the site. It's one of the things I really dig about the company, including X and H pipe variations, catless or off-road versions, obviously catted stuff as well, and even their green cat options, which is an EPA certified high flow cat. And those guys will oftentimes alleviate any emissions issues and also some inefficiency codes as well that can sometimes come along with other high flow cat options. So either way, guys, feel free to check out the many different mid-pipe solutions from Kooks. Again, about 6 altogether here at AM if you haven't already done so. Let's shift gears and talk about the installation. And honestly, guys, there's no sugarcoating this one. Long tube headers on an S197 are not fun, so expect a full 3 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter in at least a day or 2 in the shop or garage to get this one knocked out. And to give you a better idea of what you're in for with this job, here is a detailed walkthrough and a tool breakdown.
First thing we're going to do is remove the engine service cover. We got 3 8mm bolts. And after that, we're going to remove the K-member brace. It's going to open up some room for us. All right, next with a 15mm ratchet wrench, we're going to remove the chassis support brace here. There's 4 nuts. Next thing we're going to do is remove the upper motor mount nuts. I got a 15mm socket here and a long extension. I'm using a magnet to retrieve the fallen nut. We're now ready to remove our motor mounts. I have a 13mm socket. I also am using a pole jack right here. Once we get our motor mounts loose, we're gonna lift the engine up 3 to 4 inches, and that's gonna give us some more room to remove our stock manifolds. can now pull the right side motor mount out of the car. Lift the engine up slightly to get this guy out. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing on the left side now. Now we're ready to remove the stock manifolds. I have a 15 millimeter on a small extension. I'm gonna be switching up tools here. Some of them are easy to get to, some of them are hard to get to. I went through and broke a couple loose. I'm gonna use a power ratchet to speed things up a little bit. Before we remove our manifold, we need to unclip the O2 sensor. Now we're ready to pull the stock header out of the car. We're going to move on to the left side of the car now. First thing we're going to do is disconnect our steering shaft and move that out of the way. From there, we can start loosening up the manifold nuts. We're going to take a Sharpie and put a straight line down the center of our steering shaft, so when we go to put it back together, we can have it in the right orientation. All right, we've got all our nuts off of the stock manifold. I unclipped our O2 sensor, and now we can pull the stock manifold out. After that, we can begin to install our new Kooks headers. We are now ready to install our new long tube headers. We're going to slide the long tubes up in place and get some nuts started on them. All right, we're now going to install the right side long tube. Once all your bolts are tightened on your new long tubes, you can then reinstall your motor mounts. Okay, next we can reconnect our steering shaft. Next thing we can do is put the right side motor mount back in place. I'm gonna lower the engine back down now. Once we get it all the way down, we can get the nuts started on the top of the motor mount, but we won't be able to tighten them up until the car's on the ground and we can get through it from the engine bay. We're gonna put our starter back in place now. All right, one of the last things we're gonna do under here is put our O2 sensors back in. I chose to do it somewhat last. You guys can put these in before you install your X-pipe or your headers. It's all up to you. All right, and now we're gonna plug it in. All right, we got a few things to wrap up here. This is the K-member support bar that can go back on. After this, we can put our K-member support brace back up, and that's gonna wrap things up. Yep, and we're using a 15 millimeter socket here to tighten these down. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up our review and install. Be sure to check out more at AmericanMuscle.com.